Pink Cloud Radio 63. In this whole thing, really it's hard to say that it's about everything, but it's not hard to really look at it. And I think that's why I have to. The mindless desire is the way things are chosen, created on cause and effect, though free will, making into impulses and instincts. And I think about that, like how people have put that down, especially that justification to kind of say instincts and impulses are just, flash of the moment kind of things. When in fact a lot of times when you don't listen to your impulses and instincts, you might fall into a bigger problem than you would if you just kind of make your mindless desire cause and effect. Like just saying, I caused this and it affects this. In a way, it's that whole it's the whole complex of, yes, I'm responsible, but that doesn't mean I have to do anything afterward. I'm just responsible. Like that's enough almost. Like you don't need to do anything else because you already set it off. That's what a lot of people would think. Like especially with the mindless desire stuff, using cause and effect, in that you just kind of say, well, it was just my mindless desire, I didn't really think about it, but now you are. So, it's just like, the free will of, made through impulses and instincts. Those are important things, but they don't necessarily mean that everybody's going to think the same way about it. That's what I think about when I when I've thought about instincts and impulses. Like, it doesn't mean that it's one way or the other. I mean, it's easy to justify it. It's easy to justify that, oh, that was just an impulse of mine. Maybe a lot of stuff was basically in impulses and instincts for me, I wouldn't be surprised if it was, because a lot of times the things that I did were very off the cuff in a way, or just something that I didn't expect to do, and then I did. And I think a lot of people try to take advantage of that, or try to say like that's a wrong thing to do. And then, we get back to the story of, well, you're not being responsible for stuff. It doesn't mean that I don't want to be responsible for it. It's just that you're basically telling me I can't do something, but you can. And I think it comes down to that, like, the way you would do something makes you justify it, or makes you not justify it. It just makes you do whatever you want with it. And that's really what happens a lot of times. A lot of people just start saying, I don't need to justify what I do. Never asked you to justify it. I just asked you to be responsible for it. It's very different. If I asked you to justify what you did, I would tell you, justify what you did. I ask you why. Now, telling you to be responsible is not the same as justifying. If you have a mindless desire and you use cause and effect to base it off of that, then, oh, well, I can't prevent that from happening. True, but it doesn't mean you can't prevent what happens afterward to happen. It's the same story. Like, let's say you initiate somebody's suicide, and you don't want to take responsibility for that with that person. What do? Do you just allow it? No, well, he's going to commit suicide anyway, or she's going to commit suicide anyway. If you're in that storyline, what are you going to do? Are you going to be responsible, or are you going to just are you just going to be like, well, I don't need to be responsible now, I already did what I did. I don't think I could help anything by, going back to it. Sorry, guys. But I think that's the thing about justifying ourselves. Like, a lot of people don't need to. They use cause and effect to justify what happens. And I think that's the same thing with rationalization, Being rational cannot solve all problems. If so, then the machines would have won in the Matrix. That's a real truth of the Matrix trilogy, When you think about a lot of these movies that have machines in it, they're rational thinking. If rationality really is something that we all should look towards, then we don't need to be here. The machines will take over. They would have taken over in the Matrix if that were the case. They wouldn't be fighting, they wouldn't need to fight the people. the rationalization would justify everything they do. It would justify everything that happens. And I think that's where I don't agree with rationalization, because being rational doesn't necessarily work always, because that would actually mean that all this stuff that's been around now has always been around. That there's a purpose for all this stuff, even though people before us didn't use it. And I think that's where the rationalization cannot work. Because rationalization, we wouldn't be creating all this technology and stuff that is pretty useless on a big scale. And we say it is useful, Well, where would we be without technology? We might be in a different place. And that may not be a bad place. I think that's where I kind of learned what I've learned, is that a lot of people would they try to justify what's happening now by not looking at it a different way and saying, well, maybe we could have gone somewhere else instead of this. Honestly, for myself, it doesn't matter, but I do see that there could have been a lot of different things that could have occurred. Whether they're good or bad, I don't know. But like I said, it's the same thing with, mindless desire. Mindless desire is like one of the easiest things to rationalize any behavior, It's using cause and effect, but it's using it for your own advantage, so that you can deal with anything by saying, well, I knew there was going to be some kind of an effect. And I think that's where a lot of what happens really comes from, is that if you're willing to admit that you did something like that, you should be willing to take the sacrifice or take the opportunity to be responsible for it. Outside of yourself. You can fix yourself up, and, that's where a lot of people say, well, I did my job. No, you didn't. Didn't you create the issue? Yeah. So if you fix yourself, and everybody else is not, you're going to ignore them? Tell me why. Tell me why you would ignore them. Because right there and then you're proving why you would do this again. If you're not willing to put your willpower into something else besides fixing yourself, which is something you always would have done, unless you've never done it before, then you're basically saying that I don't need to be responsible for those people out there. They should be responsible, and they should know better. There's the word. Because, just because you tell somebody to be responsible doesn't mean they're supposed to be. Sometimes it's you who has to be. It's the same thing with saying, that person should know better. No, they shouldn't. You know better at that point. By saying something like that, you're showing that you know better already. So you're basically saying that I don't need to be responsible, even though I know the answer to it. I can't tell you how to do it. I've tried to, honestly. I just give people a headache. You're giving me a headache whenever I try to talk about important things that are actually dealing with what's happening. Oh, you're giving me a headache, Marcello. And then that's the end of it. It's a very pointless thing when I'm actually trying to share with you something that I've learned. It's all has to do with me, really, but there's a lot of it that I'm learning because nobody else wants to learn their own lessons. So I learn all their lessons, and I'm like, hey, why am I learning all these lessons? Then I realize, oh, it's because that person doesn't want to be responsible. I get it. Whether it's being responsible for somebody else, or honestly, it starts with being responsible with yourself. And I think that's where rationalization really is, cannot solve all problems. Like I said, the machines would have won in the Matrix if that were the case. Rationalization is one of the easiest things to obliterate individual thought in a way. Well, let's be rational here. Well, what does that mean? Let's make a decision that everybody agrees upon almost. Or it's almost like, let's agree upon an action that nobody would say, oh, that's crazy. But everything's crazy. The world is crazy. You're basically saying, let's be rational in a world that's not rational. Well, that doesn't make sense. If we were rational, well, to be honest, we would be rational with everything that's been going on. We wouldn't make ourselves have choices like just simple as having a grave site where we bury the bodies of ourselves when we die, or cremation. We wouldn't give ourselves those choices. We would pick the rational one, which would most likely be cremation in a way. We'd probably get to the point where we're like, hey, that's the rational way of doing it, because then we won't have to cover the earth in our bodies. And there's truth to that. But at the same time, we're covering ourselves in caskets as if we need to protect the bones of ourselves. Well, why? What's going to happen to the bones of ourselves if we keep ourselves in a casket? And I think that's what really is like rationalization to a lot of people, is using those kind of scapegoats, or just how we take an opportunity and use it with other people, to be rational and just get our way. Which a lot of times is what rationality is for. Rationality is hardly for, hey, let's all get along here, everyone has to be heard, no matter if we agree or not, And I think that's where a lot of times a lot of stuff ends, is with rationalization, is with cause and effect, is with how you're being responsible, how you're not being responsible. Those kind of things can end a lot of different things. It's just like family. You think about family, old generations saying, don't let people take advantage of your goodness. Though my talk about not letting government sponsored media news seems to slip by. Everyone says don't let people take advantage of your goodness, but the government does that all the time through sponsored media news. It always slips by. You accept that kind of rational thought that everything's bad. Oh shit, there's gang members right there. Oh shit, this is over here. Oh shit, this is over here. But when you're telling me don't let people take advantage of your goodness, you can't really say that because the government's doing that every day. I don't need to say that's for everybody, because it's not true. It's not for everybody, because not everybody has goodness. A lot of times, many of the people that agree with the system they're in are the worst kind of people. They're worse than the people in power who are, acknowledging or creating that kind of environment for apathy or misanthropy. So they're actually worse than the people in power because they've accepted the selfishness. No one will ever be there for them. They've already accepted their role as a cog in the machine, and now all they need to do is be upset with everybody, get what selfish needs they want. Of course, they'll never have true independence because they'll always have that. They'll always have that stark mark of selfishness. Even if they're being selfless, they'll still be selfish about it. They'll be very selfish about helping people. Like anything they can get out of it is for them. It's not for the other person. It's never about the other person. It's about me looking smarter because I helped you. Well, it doesn't mean you're a smarter person just because you helped another person. If you help another person, it's hardly about being smarter or stupider or whatever. It's mostly about just being there. And if you truly want to be there, you know what to do. And I think a lot of times that's what I mean by, family. With family, old generations, like my Mamina said to me that, don't let people take advantage of your goodness. I said, but that's impossible. How can I not? How can I not? I'm a good person. You're basically telling me, stop being a good person, but I don't feel the same way you do. You feel like a tiger. You feel like whatever you do, Mamina. You feel like on your own, that's how you feel. You feel good about it. You're fine with it. But I'm not you, Mamina. I never could think the way you do. And it's not because I haven't tried. I have. Thousands of times. Never worked. I never got any success or failure out of it that I truly wanted. Instead, I don't want to be that way. That's not my personality. It's nice that you help people. I'm not putting that down. But you can't expect me to just want to be exactly like you. I may have gotten certain speech patterns from you, but a lot of stuff you even said, oh, Marcello just made up when he was young. He just said big words when he was young. Well, I didn't get that from you, Jean-Pierre, or Mamine, or Mom. Which means a lot of the stuff that I thought of was by myself. Maybe reincarnated, maybe whatever it is. It doesn't matter at that point. Because what matters is how you're going to establish the kind of person you are. You already have, Amina. You can't basically tell me, hey, establish the same things for yourself. I don't want to. I wouldn't want to establish the same things that you did 100% the same way, because I wouldn't want to. Like I said, for example, Mamina said to me that here at the house, came into my room and said, there's a lot of junk here. I said, no, I actually use all this stuff. So, only stuff that I'd consider junk is all the plastic bags, but little by little I'm using them all. But basically, by that point, it shows that she has her own interests that are not mine. Right there. She has her gardening. She has other things that are her interests that I never put down in the way of like putting her down for it. But I personally don't like it. I don't care for it. But that's because, not because I don't see any value in nature. I just don't see any credence or any understanding that I could get more from owning the plant and taking care of it than I could from seeing the plants every day at parks or seeing them every day when I go outside. Yes, I may not see a lot. There's a lot of cement slabs everywhere. But I can't acknowledge that there's something more I could do with them. I could get a lot of experience spiritually and stuff like that, which I have. But I wouldn't know exactly where to begin with that stuff. If it does happen someday, that's great. But I personally don't feel that way. I don't feel like it will. I don't think that interest will come inside me. It's the same thing for seeing everything as hard work, for example, which it may not be hard work, but to be clear about it, a lot of times that's what a lot of stuff is to certain people. They don't look at their passions. They don't look at what they enjoy. They look at the hard work they have to put into it. I mean, what's the point? You know, at a certain point, there's a kind of a pointlessness to do something if all you see is the hard work. If there's nothing else you see. But if there is other stuff you see, you should bring that stuff up. And I think that's what I mean by, my talk about not letting government sponsor media news seems to slip by, That slips by. Oh, well, they don't own that much. The government doesn't own that much. Yes, they do. The facts are that if I went to court against a corporation, for example, they would have 100% more people to defend them because they can be defended as a human being. I'm just one human being. The artificialness of certain things actually helps the potential of saving that thing. So I'd have to really defend myself up the hilt. Not to say that it's not possible, but to show that a company, a bank, whatever, all these things are supposedly against each other even. The competition. Supposed competition. It shows right there that there's a stroke of insanity in it. Because it's basically saying that, I can be bad and accomplish so much in my life. For example, but I being good can accomplish almost nothing. And that's the thing that I've noticed with a lot of people where they say, for example, I was thinking about right now what my friend Laura said about, from school, Laura Ash, that about how you couldn't put yourself in a position of, entertainment and stuff like that because you'd be in that thing where people could plant drugs, do stuff to you, that kind of stuff. At the same point, an intersection being huge in this, I've noticed that a lot of that stuff will never be disregarded as bad. Now, I consider it bad if I wasn't interested in that stuff, and I'm not. So when I think about drugs, drinking, all that stuff, I don't really look at it like, hey, this is a great thing to have. I think of it more like it's not a luxury, it's not anything bad, it's just a choice at that point. Now, I'd consider it that way, that's the way I consider it. It's just the same reason why I would say that being good, having a goodness about you, can create problems too. Huge problems. Because a lot of times people aren't used to it. So, like, if, for example, if someone digs deep and says, don't let somebody take advantage of a goodness, it's impossible. Are they good? Are you telling me basically I can't hang out with somebody because they are going to take advantage of my goodness no matter what? If they do, they will. That's their attitude, that's their personality. You're basically telling me, stop hanging out with people that aren't like you. But you don't make that choice. I do. Yes, they not get along with you, and you already know that. From how you act about things, nobody get along with you except people that have the same understanding. But not everybody does. I understand that. I sit here today with no logic and reason. I don't need anybody to have the exact same life I do. In fact, I don't need anybody to have any thoughts the same way I do. They just have to want to be there to hear me and to hear my side and to know that I'm not here trying to be better or trying to be worse. I'm just being who I am. And it may end up in a bad place, but it's the same thing with bleeding hearts of people in America. You know, they cry very specifically. Hypocritical hearts. That's what it is, you know. That's what I've noticed with a lot of people. They always, you know, they have bleeding hearts for certain people. You know, they have bleeding hearts. They go, you know, oh, all those people at the Boston Marathon, the 3 people that were killed. But at the same time, we look at other people around the world that are being killed, and we don't think nothing of it. You know, in that way, at least. In that where we would have a bleeding heart about it. When we should, honestly. I personally feel the pain of the world right now. The difference is I'm not able to skip about and just ignore it or be in an imagination world about it. I just don't know where to go with it right now. Because there's so much pain. There's so much damn pain in this that you could see it every day. You know, if you're going to ignore it, you can't get me to talk about it. It's the same thing. Like, if you want to talk about something, let's talk. If you don't want to deal with something, then I think differently than you. You should accept that responsibility and say, oh, you know what? You think differently than me. I may not agree with you, but I know that you're here. I know that you are a person who thinks his own way. But I think a lot of people just assume that, oh, it's because of other people that they think that way. Well, it's the same reason you do. You agree with science. You agree with math. You agree with religion. You agree with the system in general. I mean, you know, you used any of the symbiosis of what's already been here to represent you. You know, so if I'm represented by somebody else who's off that cuff, or, well, you're just doing it for rebellion or compliance. I don't need to rebel or comply. I just want to live my life. If I don't feel like if I'm able to live my life because of what you want to do to it, to my personal life, based on everybody else too, because this isn't a house of cards where you can just take away one card and say, well, you won't get hurt from this. At that point, the whole house of cards falls down, which means you're taking everybody's rights away. You're not just taking anybody. You know, that's what I heard on this morning on Fox 11 News. What was it? Steve Edwards said, people only recognize when they take away the rights. Well, I'm glad they do when they try to change them. Wow, I'm glad they do. And he's right. But it doesn't mean that they have the right to take it away just because we don't recognize it or practice it. You know, just because we don't pay attention or use those means doesn't mean you can just do that. Now, it doesn't mean they won't, but right there, he's proving why they do. Well, people don't represent themselves in those rights. They don't use them when they're there for them. So let's take them away. Oh, really? So that's your ideal. That's what you can do with it. You can't let people have their rights. And right there and then, I've noticed the kind of, not pressure, but the kind of points of justice people make for how they justify what they do. Everybody. They justify what they do by what you ignore. Or by what you don't ignore. You know, what they say to you. Well, you know, you're just another conspiracy theorist. Another conspiracy theorist? How many have there been? That's what I always ask, because literally, if you think I'm just another conspiracy theorist, then that's fine. But you have to explain which ones do you know. You know, if you're gonna... I just don't think they have that power. Okay, well, I do. Well, I don't need to think that somebody has to be smart to do bad things, you know. Nobody has to have, like, a genius mind to do something evil. All they have to do is take advantage of people. That's not very hard to do. You know, I don't think you need to be smart to take advantage of somebody. But that's how I feel. You know, I understand if you think that somebody has to be smart to do that. But I personally feel that you don't need to be smart at all. All you need to do is take advantage of people. That's it. So you think you take advantage of that much? Yep. Well, worse than that. I couldn't even explain. I wish, like, it was easy as saying, like, oh, it's just all those conspiracies and stuff. My God, it's not that easy. There's a ton of different stuff that historically have been there, and then were taken away or were separated from us, or were separated from science, for example, like metaphysics. A lot of stuff that has been around that honestly wasn't taken seriously and was separated. But how do we know that there's nothing in there? You know, at this point, we're not researching that. So we basically eliminated certain equations to say we're only going to focus in on this. And this is the only way we're going to do it. Where they voted, like in the late 80s, early 90s, about what is science. They declared cold fusion, for example, as not science. That's not scientific. And they said that they put in higher temperatures than they actually said. And that wasn't true. They lied. They lied to make certain sciences wrong. or certain sciences to not be represented for or funded. So only certain science was actually accepted in the main public rubric. But that's exactly how you do it. You just have a majority rule. The groupthink mentality. And that's why what I mean by bleeding hearts of people in America. They cry very specifically, hypocritical hearts. It's true. It's sad because I would actually see what kind of answers they give to almost everything. And most of them are pretty heartless human beings. They decide to be that way, no denial. They decide on their own. They don't need government to do anything to them to make them do that. All they do is go for revenge and bullying. All they do is just do what they want to do selfishly. That's all they need to do. They don't need anybody else's approval. And I think that's what really justifies everything that happens. See, look at the shadows of the past. Sometimes it hits us hard, but we can't let it take advantage and opportunity to tell us what to do. I think that's what really is one of the biggest things that I've noticed. And they are hypocritical hearts, but they're very specific. Very specific. And it's like collateral damage and dog eat dog. Look at collateral damage, that's lives can be lost and not cared about. That's just collateral damage. And that's where a lot of people, they justify certain things by words, by labeling a definition to it, by putting a word on top of it, and saying, oh, that's just collateral damage from what event happened, or what hurt, or what took place here. Whether it was something we personally went out and did, or on the other hand, where somebody else did it. It was collateral damage. But at the same time, certain people who are dead from collateral damage are actually still cried for very specifically. So I think that's what really is collateral damage, is that it's something that occurs, but at the same time there are certain ones that are more respected and certain ones that are not. I lived my life seeing how that was going on in the Middle East from the beginning of my life to now. And I think from the first Iraq war to all these years that have gone on so far, I've seen all the lies. They could say all they want. They could spin the story however they want, but they did those lies. The incubator incident, everything else that's come since then. From even the tanks that were around Kuwait that weren't there. They just had an image that showed tanks around Kuwait, and there were no tanks at all around Kuwait like that. Yeesh. They lied. They lie, and we have to be merciful. It really is that. We have to be merciful for liars. For liars. But, it's the old saying, where a lot of people say, oh, don't worry, they'll get theirs for doing what they did. Yeah, they are getting theirs. They're getting whatever they want. So, if you think getting theirs is actually winning everything and, getting everything with corruption and working with both sides, yeah, they're getting theirs all right. Woo, I can see it. And I think that's what people live on. They live on that hope of, irritants and just oh, I know they do bad, but they'll get theirs. And they live in that hope. They live in that kind of blind hope of, something will happen to them. And then nothing ever does. I mean, if you want our empire to fall the way it, if you want our state and country and the world to fall the way it will, which it will, then go ahead, keep on saying that. But hope never changes a lot of stuff. You have to do it by yourself. And it's not bad to. And it's just like dog eat dog, Dogs don't eat dogs. Humans kill humans. Or man kill man. That should be it. Human kill human. Or man kill man. Dogs don't eat dogs. So if it's a dog eat dog world, have you seen dogs eat dogs like that? I'd like to see that. Now I've seen fights. I've seen brutal fights too that were done between dogs at certain points in my lifetime through YouTube and such, where I've seen random videos of people pitting dogs against each other. That's horrible. But if that's a great illustration of our world right now. Dog eat dog. Something that is so, animal abuse. Well, that's disgusting, I just have to say. But it shows exactly what we do to each other. It shows exactly why dog eats dog. Because right there, what they're basically planting in us is the kind of objective they want in their lives. for us to be visceral, for us to be vicious about what we want, selfishly. Of course, no one would ever believe that for a bit because, why? How could they have that much power over us? Because they already have. Did you grow up and believe that money was valued? Did you grow up believing that the banks and corporations and everything around you was there? And what, that was it? Then you've already been bought into the illusion. You've bought into the illusion. Going to theme parks, going to anything you want, seeing a movie. You've bought into the illusion, And I'm not talking about you can't do those things if you truly don't see it. If you truly don't see it, it's just that no matter if you see it or don't, you have to run by the system because it's still here. Sadly, it's still here. And I think that's what I mean by dog eat dog, It's as ugly as that. And I think that's what really cancels out a lot of different feelings and a lot of different purposes of what we feel. So if I were to tell you something important in my life is, and what is, seeing as what happened, that that human kill human. I mean, that's what we do. And I think that's where a lot of stuff has changed for our world, sadly. I wouldn't know exactly where to go from here, but I would tell you right now that what we're doing to try to fix it is not going to work because we don't take the opportunity to look at what the problems are. You can't really fix something if you don't look at the problems. And I think that's what I mean. Well, you got to lay down with dignity, not with tears and agony. And that's what a lot of people do. They lay down with tears and agony. They don't lay down with dignity. They don't lay down with their dignity and try to see something new and different and try to understand it better with a new, refreshed look. They totally ignore that and they say, I'm just going to be bitter, sad, and try to see if somebody recognizes it and will do anything about it. That's what most people do. That's why most people have cried during a lot of stuff that has gone on in the past 10, 20 years of gun shootings and everything else. They want somebody to protect them from this, to lay down and, to have the tears and agony, stop completely. They want their emotions gone. Don't worry, ladies and gentlemen. If you want them gone, they've never been there to begin with. Just because you're crying doesn't mean you actually are crying. It actually means that you're very hypocritical in your heart. Your bleeding heart doesn't represent everybody. You don't cry for every death. You only cry for certain deaths. Yes, because, other people in other countries are not human at all. Everybody has thoughts of killing. If you haven't, then you're not human. But at the same time, not everybody has the same cohesive thought to just do something about it. For me, for example, there's a good joke that I have for it. That, for example, if I was to commit suicide, let's just say, I don't feel that way, but let's say I wouldn't take anybody else with me. They love it here. The reason I want to commit suicide, if I did, was because I wanted to get out of here. Why would I want to take anybody with me that wants to stay here, that loves this place for some bitter, hostile reason? Because that's how they do it. That's how they live here, If we can't live in peace, then let us die in peace. And that's what I've learned really about life, that honestly, it comes from that, Real freedoms don't come from just legislation, laws, prisons, rules, they don't come from that stuff. A lot of people like to think that, but the rights are already there. So for us to condemn people for doing what they want, if you're going to limit somebody who's that evil to do what they want, then you're going to limit everybody to do what they want. I think that's one thing that I've learned very heavily. That if you're going to basically tell everybody you can't do the things in that way, you're basically telling everybody else that you can't do anything either. Because of this one person. It's just a privilege now. Fuck you. If we can't live in peace, then let us die in peace, And it's true, If we can't live in peace, then let us at least die in peace. Because, and that's what I would mean by, looking at it in that perspective of committing suicide or any ideas like that. At least I'd be peaceful, Here in this world, I'm not looking at it and saying that, oh, there's nothing I can do. There is only so much I can do, though, because a lot of people don't like goodness, sadly. I'd love it if a lot of people liked goodness, if a lot of people wanted people around that were good. I'd love it. Oh my God, I'd feel a great shock, a great relief. A great understanding that somebody actually wants me there. But to be honest about it and fruitful about what I learn and knowledge and everything else, nobody does. Nobody does. They want an identity between themselves and the other person with logic and reason and rationalization of what they want. But right there and then, they're showing the bitterness of what they won't accept. Everything. I am all the bad and good. I can't separate myself from all those no names to change or distance myself. I do all the good and evil, And that's what really is life. Is that, when I could say like, oh, who killed this guy or who killed the congressman or whatever, I did, It was a part of me there. It was a part of me in every single bad thing that has happened. Whether it was our side or their side, the conflict doesn't matter at that point. It matters what it does. And I think that's what a lot of people ignore. They look at what the conflict is. They look at what the conflict is, and then they ignore why. They ignore who it is. But it's just you, all over again. It's just war and peace all over again. And I think that's what really has been the standard to a lot of people's thoughts, is that they're kind of seeing a built persuasion to think one way about stuff, that it must be that way, that even with like war and peace, there's a lot more ways of thinking about it than just what people have made it up to be, which, there is certain things that are always going to be part of it, but there's obviously a lot that you could learn from the parts that have come and come and come and come in many ways. I think that's what I mean by when I say I am all the good and bad. I am. I'm all the bad and good and all this stuff. I can't separate myself from all these. No names to change or distance myself from it, because there is no distance from it, In a lot of ways, I actually feel more represented by the bad stuff that happens because then I'm ignored. Then the people look at that and go, ooh, and they stop asking you to do something better. Because you can't do something better if all they're paying attention to and looking at is the ugly things out there. Because there's a lot more ugly things before that, underneath that, from that came out of that, before it happened. And I think that's what a lot of people don't look at. They don't look at the shape of things before something bad like that happens. They look at the shape of things from that happening. And that's what I would think when I look at what the gun issue is right now. Like, oh, people shouldn't be able to have firearms and stuff like that. Certain firearms. It's not going to be about that, though. I mean, if that's the one thing you're paying attention to and prattling on about, then you truly don't care about the people who died at any of these things that happened in the past 10, 20 years. You don't care about their deaths. All you care about is what is you feeling safe. If you truly wanted these people to get help, you've already done so. You've helped them a lot, And I think that's what I think a lot of people don't look at it that way, that, we got to stop the human condition of how people think. Well, it was brought up in this society. So for me to look at it and say, oh, well, it's just because they're Muslim, or it's just because they're a terrorist, or just because they're this, that, the other. No, that's an easy way to look at it. I think that's one of the easiest ways to separate ourselves from those people, individual or not. Right there and then, we're showing that we have constraints on looking at it in a bigger picture and saying that maybe there's something else above this that has been an issue. And that's why this is happening right here. And I think that's where a lot of people say, well, what, you're blaming us for that? I say, yes, of course I am, because we're doing wars again and again with the same people again and again. So you're basically telling me to condemn myself for it. I'm not going to. I see the violence that we're doing, and it's no better than theirs. And so I'm standing here today telling you that, your speech is bullshit. To say that we can actually change these conditions, you can't change the conditions with doing the exact same thing to them. And I think that's where a lot of people get that head complex of saying they're better than everybody else. Well, if you are, you don't need to be around here. If you're better than everybody else, leave planet Earth, please. I'm sorry, just leave planet Earth. You don't need to be here. If you think you're better than everybody else, get out of here. You don't want to be here with these people who you don't think can match up to you. If that's the point of life, there you go. Biggest bullshit, get out of the fucking picture. You know where to go. There's a lot of places you can go where you could just be alone. You don't need to worry about a single damn thing. No matter how much money it takes, it's probably better than staying here with people that you don't think can match up to you. And I think that's what I've learned of this whole thing. That it goes back to that. I am the bad and good. I am the good. I'm the good and evil of it all. Why? I have no choice in it. It's nice that a lot of people out there like representing themselves and saying that they're a good person in general. I don't really see it. It's hard for me to believe that when I see how many people aren't, or how strung they are to just get their position done. It doesn't make you a good person. Yes, it makes you a good business person. Doesn't mean you're a good person, though. And I think that's what really is the difference, is that a lot of people think they're a good person because they're able to construct a kind of environment for where they're supposed to go in life. So when they kind of say that they're a good person, it's because they're able to go through difficult situations and be a strong, business thinking kind of person. It's the same thing with imagination. That they're able to escape reality in that way, or escape with security in that way. And I think that's what really is the security blanket with either side. Is that, can you live without those things around you? Because that's where you have freedom. But what if you escape those things and you see you have no freedom? What if you don't have those thoughts and you see, like I do, where there is no freedom? Because if there was, it's not a privilege. It's something that's innately there. I think that's what I've learned from a lot of people, that they ignore those kind of things because they don't want to mess with the social pressures. But at some point you will have to. It doesn't seem to be an issue when it's about gay marriage, sexual orientation. It's not an issue when it's about abortion. It's not an issue when it's about civil rights. It's not an issue when it's about voting. A lot of things, people have gone to the extreme of doing those things. But, individual rights, self-ownership, there's an issue there. Individuals, we can't go that far. We'll get the bigger picture for you. But that's all we can do. We'll get the physical outlet. But that's all we'll do. But the physical outlet is nothing without the individual. The physical outlet, the self-ownership, all that stuff that's needed in this, is more needed than anything outside of that. If I needed to get married to somebody of the same sex, I'm not going to go after that kind of goal first before knowing that my individuality is protected 100%. And I think that's where a lot of people are able to just get into any kind of relationship, whether sex or options or whatever they want, because they're able to look at it and say, well, it's an easy way to do things. I don't have to get attached to this kind of person, connected. I just do what I want and I can move on. Well, go ahead, But you can't make me think the same way about it, and I wouldn't, because I don't feel that same way about it. I just feel that my opportunity in life, what I have to lay down with, is what I lay down with, It's not going to be about who I lay down with. It's going to be what I lay down with. And I think that's where a lot of the stuff that has come throughout, our lifetimes and everything has been, based on a lot of principles of old thinking. Whether those are good or bad, I don't give a fuck, because I'm looking at it from a big perspective of, like mindless desire. What is mindless desire? Well, mindless desire is probably one of the biggest issues that's going to hit the fan when, you're thinking one way. And when you don't want to, or when you want to separate yourself from that, you won't be able to. All you'll do is construct that same image. And I think that's where what I've learned about life, about everything, is it's coming from a lot of what has happened before. And I think that's where a lot of stuff will continue to go. It's the same reason why I could say that, I am the bad and good. I am the good and evil, because I'm not here to separate myself from it. I'm here to understand it. I'm here to not just be a dog-eat-dog or, collateral damage. But I don't know what's going to happen. Maybe you just end up like that. Sadly, that could be the end of it. And I think that's where a lot of what Pink Cloud is about. It's not about looking at it from a perspective of we need to get our system in check. No, we need to get our system out of check. The only system we need in check is ourselves. Then from that, we'll see if we need to shovel dirt or get rid of the herd, meaning that we need to get rid of this whole thing. We'll see when that day comes, but none of that stuff is going to change until your individuality wants to be there. You spare no expense for it. Let's just say it that way. But if you do spare an expense for it, then that means you can be bought off of your individual thought, of your persona. Your individuality, who you are, can be bought off. So I love you all, and you all take care. Okay? Take care.